So again, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. Are you here for the next 2 days? Right, so you've got a couple of days. I've got lots of follow-up questions as well. So what we'll do is we'll introduce each of the senior leaders to the stage in turn, and then we'll get the panel kicked off. So first of all, we've got obviously Mr. Ali Reza Kalahi from APAR Wire and Cable, and then we've actually got Mr. Hassan Omar, who's actually from DUCAB. And thankfully, Mr. Omar agreed to step in for Mr. Andrew Shaw, so thank you for stepping in at short notice. Mr. Hassan Omar has over 18 years' experience in the cable industry. He's currently the Chief Operating Officer for DUCAB, the leading cable manufacturing company in the UAE, as you know. Hassan spearheads product development and is a key member of the strategy setting process of the group. He's also active in non-governmental organisations in his work and the capacity as a board member of BASEC, which is the British Approval Service for Cables, as you know, and he's also a board member of the Dubai Quality Group. Hassan is a graduate from the University of Miami in the US, and he also has an MBA from the American University of Sharjah in the UAE. So welcome to the panel. Then we're going to be joined by Mr. Max-Andre Delanoy from Nexans. He's Chief Executive Officer, Qatar International Cables Company, QIC. And Mr. Delanoy was telling me earlier that he's been at QIC a year, and it was a kind of a tumultuous week when you joined last year with the issues around Qatar and sanctions, etc. So Max-Andre Delanoy is the General Manager for GCC countries for Nexans. He's the CEO of Qatar International Cables Company. Max joined Nexans in 2011 and has taken several lead roles, including business developer, risk and special project director, and corporate VP strategy and transformation programs. And finally, we're inviting to the stage Mr. Mohammed Itani, Managing Director of Energia Cables. Mohammed Itani is CEO of Energia Cables Company. He's a recognised leader in executive development, having served a global client base since 2001. While working his way to the executive level, Mohammed has held a number of positions, being in charge of manufacturing, quality control, plant engineering and business management. Mohammed has been with Energia Cables for almost 16 years, and you'll remember him from our panel, a very good panel we had last year as well. So welcome back.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do is just, we've got a number of questions. I guess if we'll run through from left to right, just a quick overview of what you do in your company and some of the challenges you face as in a leadership role. So if you want to just kick off.
Oh,
yeah, sure.
I thought you were...
Sure.
Sorry, could you go?
So just start off what your role is and some of the challenges you find in your leadership role.
I've got a number of hats, so I'm heavily involved in the non-government sector in Iran. Up until about 6 months ago, I was chair of the Iranian Electrical Industry Syndicate, representing about 500 companies, some as large as MAPNA, which is bigger than Ansaldo. Power plant manufacturer, they manufacture turbines, generators, do EPC work in power plants and oil and gas sector. 2 small family-owned operations. Within the family group, I run, basically, I'm executive chair of the entire group. I oversee strategy, business development, and not really involved in day-to-day operations of the company. Obviously involved in e-commerce and tech. I would say much more exciting, perhaps sexier, if that's the word, industry than our relatively slow-paced industry. And also right now involved in the Tehran Chamber of Commerce. Basically, we've got 40 elected delegates to the Tehran Chamber of Commerce. I'm one of them. Our role is to liaise with the government to try and let's say, formulate more sensible economic policies.
Thank you. Mr. Omar?
Yes. My role, I'm involved in manufacturing and technical and quality and QHSE, that's internally, and also heavily involved in the strategy process and setting the strategy process of the company. Also externally, I'm involved with the governmental and non-governmental bodies in the UAE, specifically the standardization bodies like ESMA. Outside of the UAE, I'm involved with bodies like British Approval Services for electric cables, and so the key challenges I find is in the changes that are taking place currently in the industry in general, and matching and catering to those changes internally. I do a lot of work with the utilities and also a lot of work with the new standards that are coming up. So maybe I can elaborate on that later on during the discussions.
Sure. Mr. Delanoy?
Yeah, as General Manager for GCC for Nexans, I would say the challenge for a CEO are for me on threefold: strategy, the operational excellence, and people development. And I would say that since I joined, I took this position in GCC, there's a lot of focus on strategy to adapt the strategy of a global group like Nexans to the environment here in GCC, which is really volatile, I mean, economically and politically, and that has a lot of impact on the strategy and of our operation. And it's not only to look long term what will happen in 2030, but really to adapt at a much faster pace to all this change. So I would say, as a CEO, we always have to focus on strategy, operations, and people, but strategy nowadays, it's we need to move much faster than before, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tani?
Yes, first as introduction, Jeddah Cable, everybody knows Jeddah Cable more than Energia, but as an introduction, Jeddah Cable is only a company part of Energia Group, where Energia Group, we go into turnkey EPC projects and the cables, high voltage and extra high. We have operating facilities in Saudi Arabia and in Egypt. And at the same time, we have all kinds of electrical manufacturing. It goes to lighting, LED lamps, panel boards. We also signed a new agreement for a switchgear manufacturing also in Saudi Arabia. We're trying to diversify our product range. It's not only for the cables, but going a little bit away from the cables, because we all see all the challenges that we've been passing through, maybe in the region. In terms of challenges that we are facing, for sure, we've seen that market is the biggest challenge. One day, over a small amount of time, we have seen 2009, 2000, which was the biggest drop in demand. Saudi Arabia was also a big drop also in terms of pricing. And then we see only 2-3 years where we have some reasonably good demand, and then all of a sudden the market drops up again. So these challenges that now we are facing, mainly also coming from I want to consider the geopolitical situation that's in the region, also the restructurings that's taking place in Saudi Arabia. These reforms by itself for sure will affect the economy and affect the demand, because the government has set up a list of priorities. I do agree with what Mr. Hamid said in the morning. What Saudi Arabia is now and what it will become is totally different than what it was more than 5 years back. And changes started to take place. And once you have these changes, for sure, there will be a suppression in the consumption and the demand. Nowadays, Saudi Arabia is, in our cable factory, we're running maybe 40% of our capacity at the total. Some of the product ranges, we're running maybe 10%. Second, also, we see the volatility of copper. You also always, customers, they tend to be risk averse. When copper goes up, you've seen the volatility in the last 1 week, $500 drop. You've seen aluminum, 2,010, 2,500 something. By itself, the customer will lose the confidence in the product and will start to feel a little bit averse from taking risk and to develop the business or to make orders with the cable factories. Also, the retention of talents. This is extremely important. We know that the cable business is not an easy one, and talents in that specific sector are not that much available. So you need to make sure that these talents are retained. and to keep developing them, and just waiting for the market to pick up and then to harvest these investments that you're doing in your resources. There are many challenges, honestly, but I will only list these because cables is the biggest challenging industry that you cannot plan for the unpredictable, and I believe cables is planning for the unpredictable. So enough with these challenges.
So I mean, it sounds the industry's got tougher over the last 2 or 3 years.
To be honest, nowadays, yes, for the first time, and I've been in the cable industry and in Jeddah Cable specific, now close to 18 years. We have never entered a year with a zero backlog. And in 2018, we entered 2018 with zero backlog. SEC, until now, they did not develop any contract. Normally, they make a blanket contract agreement with the cable factories. We are now in May, which is 5 months past the year, and we don't have any agreement with SEC. We are relying on our export mainly. As I told you, Saudi Jeddah Cable advantages is also located in a way indirectly in Africa. This is where also, honestly, we are playing good role. In the Gulf, we are as aggressive for the UAE manufacturers as if we are Saudis, as if we are in Saudi Arabia. We've been banned also, from the Qatar. We used to have a reasonably good market share in Qatar, but for the last 1 year, it is a drop. So technically, it is, I believe, 2018 for me is tougher than 2017. In 2016, we came to 2017 with some momentum, and this momentum has helped us in 2017. But we came to 2018 and with a lot of potential rather than kinetic energy, and can I say, then we are waiting, expect that we are, instead of we are moving.
Thank you. Does anyone want to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Mohammed mentioned is, I agree with him, it's getting tougher, but maybe to elaborate furthermore, from my perspective, I would generalize it under commoditization. And what we should be looking for is decommoditizing. For example, if you look at the utility approval lists of cable makers, earlier I remember it used to be maybe 2 lines, 3 lines, it became a page, and now it's a couple of pages at least. It's good. You could argue this is competition and you need productivity out of that. But I'm talking about the replication of that. If you look at the replication of that, the consequences of that in the supply chain, you go to, for example, and it's just an example, it's, please, I'm not criticizing, I'm just using it as an example. If you go in the supply chain, if you take that example as a material that's used for a certain grade, let's say 11 kV, and then the supply uses it for a higher grade, you could argue that's technically viable. You could also argue from the raw material supplier that there has been a change and a shift in the technology. So maybe it's cleaner material, there's a shift in that, so the material is fit. But why not argue from the other side? Meaning that specification, aging, maybe the aging, that material could, under that voltage, can last for maybe a theoretical life of 25 to 40 years. But why not argue 60 years? Okay, that depends on the build. But we could take arguments like that, and this maybe would take us out of that spiral of being a commodity into decommoditizing the product in general. So I agree, we're under pressure, but the challenge for us basically is to educate, I'm not saying the purchasing managers of the utilities in this case, but the various stakeholders about upscaling this to come out of the commodity level into a higher performance level.
Are you optimistic? I mean, what's your view on kind of? We heard from Mr. Atani, who was saying it's obviously tough. How are you seeing business right now?
Economically, I mean, I'm in line with him. I mean, earlier presentations where Mr. Hamid discussed, he said that the spending in general is being diverted into other more strategic or priority has shifted. So the spending is diverted into certain areas. But that will change. But meanwhile, I mean, what should we as cable makers be doing? Should we accept the commodity level in general? It will change. And once it changes, where should we be? This is where, I mean, you mentioned like the uncertainty and the planning should change, scenarios, etc. We should be looking for the next scenario. I mean, economically, yes, there are certain things that you could do. You could look for other markets, etc. But I'm talking from the perspective of cables. Are cables a commodity in general? I mean, raw material has changed. They're improving all the time. I mean, Ali, you're talking about the compounding unit now. I'm sure there's a niche. If it's a commodity, you wouldn't be doing that.
But I mean, as I said, I'm involved in a number of industries, and really this, to me, is the toughest industry I've been in. It's highly capital intensive. It's very difficult to get good BI out of the business. I mean, compared to, for example, e-commerce, we get daily reports on exactly what's happening. The risks are high. You mentioned the price fluctuations, and a lot of our contracts are fixed price, especially in the oil and gas sector, are fixed price. So we get, and then you have an issue of hedging, and in some markets like Iran, when the financial system is not developed, it's very difficult. Talent, I definitely agree with. As I said, it's not exactly the world's most exciting, sexiest industry to attract young people to. And it's the same in Iran. It's been difficult. The margins are low. And I really think fighting the commoditization is an uphill battle. And perhaps, I know with DUCAP, you guys are so efficient that perhaps it's very difficult to become any more productive than you already are. But at least when I look around the companies in Iran, I see a lot of inefficiencies that makes the competition really ripe for taking out. And this is a signal I've given my sales team. That meet going to tenders down to break-even point. Just drive the competition out of business.
Actually, we have a question from the audience, which is linked to that. Is supplying Iranian cable companies, in supplying Iranian cable companies, how easy is it to get paid?
Choose your customers wisely. Again, there is no organized credit rating system in Iran. It's who you know and what you know. And you have to choose your customers wisely. A lot of companies are under extreme financial pressure. And they're quoting stupidly low prices, which is just just means they're digging themselves into a deeper hole.
Max?
I mean, I agree with what has been said, especially by you, Mohamed and Hassan. Another challenge for our industry now, and we have seen that in the previous presentation, is that the market is more and more fragmented. There is more and more officialized local content rules. I mean, you say that for the power plant. We see the in-country value program in all the countries, and that makes. We cannot say that there's a Middle East cable market. I mean, there's a collection of markets. There is some opening for export in between, but for a global company like Nexans, who can serve the market from local plants and also from abroad, it starts to be very, very fragmented, and so you have to select the market on which you want to play, and I mean, be qualified there and have the setup to bring the local content requested by the country. I would say this kind of protection, it's on short term for everybody, it seems to be more comfortable, but on the long term for the industry, it's not how the industry will progress and how we will bring the best to our customers. So for us, it's also a very big challenge. So we have these local content protections, and I mean, Nexans being also based in Qatar, on top, we have now this Qatar blockade which has changes, at least in Qatar and some neighboring countries, the dynamic of competition. So we need to adapt to that. But even without this, I would say, political issues of the blockade on Qatar, the local content rules that have started before and continue and are reinforced everywhere are something that, on the long term, for the cable industry, is probably not a good thing.
And I guess Nexans is an international.
I think it's off. I turned it off.
Okay, so Nexans is an international company, and obviously some parts of the world, the cable industry is very strong right now. We're hearing bottlenecks and people at capacity. How does that impact your organisation? Would you be able to produce locally in Qatar and export it back to France? Is that an issue that becomes part of your your remit?
Indeed, with this change, we have to adapt our strategy. To source the local market from other units, and also to use the units in Middle East to serve other markets. But that's not like that. You have the qualification process, you have transport cost, and globally it's not efficient for an industry to make the goods traveling all around the world to reach where they have to be. So we have a lot of tools to adapt. That's the point of and the advantage of being to have a global reach. But for the competitiveness of the industry generally, and for to be able to offer the best to our customer, it's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, I guess one of the questions that we were looking at before was we talked about raw material sourcing. How has these sanctions impacted you running your business in Qatar?
So we are not only in Qatar. So for the other business, from Lebanon, no change. For Qatar, indeed, most of our raw material we used to source from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, from Egypt, and we had to change completely our supply chain to be able to source. And the organization has been a bit shaky last summer just to set things in place, and now we have a robust supply chain with quite a new range of suppliers from everywhere. I would say in the world, being India, being Southeast Asia, being the rest of the world, from Europe,
So the challenge was you joined and had to suddenly find new sources.
Yes.
Does anyone else want to follow up? Or?
Which bit?
Well, just the challenges.
Pricing. I think the main challenge really is pricing. I've seen one of our staple products, which has been 132 kV cable into Iraq. The price in the last 10 years has gone from about $120 a meter to below 60. It's absolutely crazy. Considering how the Iraqis pay and the extra cost you face for doing business in Iraq, I really can't see how they're making money at these prices.
Right. What kind of utilization rates are we seeing in the industry at the moment for you guys?
I think 40-50% is about right.
Right.
That's the norm, yes. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Are we going to see some consolidation in Saudi or other parts of the region with those kind of levels?
Iran, maybe. Iran will have to consolidate. You can't carry on in a market the size of Iran with 100 players. And it's, the government policies are phasing out the gray economy. So a lot of these companies will have to become transparent. They're gradually tightening the noose and making it very difficult to basically escape, to go without having proper books and invoices. And I think what will also happen, because the subsidies on raw materials have gone, the companies will, I think a lot of people will go out of business. They will really have to revise their business models. And I don't see a lot of these old traditional companies being run by old people being able to reform themselves quickly enough to stay in business. So at least that's a ray of light for me in the Iranian market. And I really think once the market grows, considering how weak the competition is, the outlook is, the reason I've stayed in this business, otherwise I would have sold that a long time ago, considering the margins and the difficulties this business has, I see the potential for creating another billion-dollar company in the Iranian market.
Yeah, I would say the issue is not about the consolidation. This is, if it's going to happen, it's going to be natural. And it's going to be basic law of economy. And we've seen other markets, more mature markets, where that actually took place. We can draw from history. The question is about looking for new markets and satisfying the requirements of those markets and the capabilities, the mindset that you have to put in place to do so, rather than just thinking locally. That will happen naturally.
Which means getting on a plane and traveling around the world, meeting
customers
in India, in Southeast Asia.
It's going to mean that. It's also going to, it means also looking at what are the standards that are out there that are not yet legislated here, or what new requirements are you able to satisfy? I have lots of examples. The new requirements of the fire performance, for example, it's not a requirement over here, but it's in other markets. Are you going to put investments to take care of that? if you look, another key example that was mentioned over here is talent retention. I mean, to do that, you need brain power. Ali mentioned, yes, the industry is not exciting enough for the new graduates. Even if you attract them, they will leave you in they will leave you in less than a couple of years. So that's a lost investment. How are you going to make the industry attractive to them? I mean, everybody now is talking about Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, which is the strategy of the UAE. This is what's going to attract them. So you have to build that capability, and for the UAE market or for your local market, and also to cater for the global market as well. So these are the type of investments that you have to do rather than thinking of consolidation, and that I think will happen naturally.
So, I mean, regarding escaping the commoditization trap, I think it's going to be really tough because the quality is an intangible issue and it's not immediately apparent. I mean, I've talked to contractors, and this is actually an issue. If you're talking to the end user, like the utility, is a lot easier. They're a lot more sensitive on quality. But you talk to contractors, and I had one recent negotiation where my competition for medium voltage cables was silent cross-linked steam-cured cables. And I told the contractor, you know what, these cables are going to last only about 5 years. And he said, oh, I don't care. My warranty is 18 months. And this competition's on the vendor, and this company is on the vendor list. And this is the answer you hear my sales team brings back to me, you know, from every single meeting. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to escape that commoditization. Perhaps for a very few specialized products, endowment cables, offshore cables, maybe. But apart from that, I think it's a reality we have to face. And then
it becomes an issue of operational excellence, you know, fighting for every single cent.
Let's say I'm a supplier and I want to supply you with some latest kit. How do I know, who do I choose in Iran? How do I know who to supply? You know, how transparent is it going to get? You said there's problems working out, you know, there's no credit rating, etc. But presumably Iran needs that investment. How do I, as an investor, know who to work with?
Find local partners. Iran is not a market, I would say, and I have seen very few cases of foreign companies doing well on their own. We've seen a lot of big companies moving to Iran. Japan Tobacco made an acquisition of around 450 million euros, buying a major cigar plant. As I said, automotive, oil and gas, pharma, consumer goods. Procter & Gamble is entering into a JV. But it's not a market. You need good local people, either as on the management team or as partners.
Any follow-up?
Look, there are two major points that have been discussed here. The number one is the decommoditization of the products, and number two is the consolidation. And decommoditizing the product of cables, I believe, is one of the most difficult tasks on the cable factories that they have to do. I personally tried this at the high level. I went to try to connect the quality and the technology for high voltage cables, and was one of the big utilities in the region, and it was really difficult to do this. You can see that the motto of the utility is to mainly, unfortunately, is price. Unfortunately, yes. And then once you give the opportunity for the contractor to have, as what Ali said, as a company under the vendor list that can produce all kinds of cables on the same machine, and then for high voltage you can see that they can still do this, and then they are approved. And then going and negotiating, and then you will, unfortunately, claim to be trying to monopolize the market instead of trying to help them, saying that I'm going to give you a good quality and innovative product that can last, instead of what also Hassan said, 4 years, 6 years, or 10 years, 15 years, or 15 years, 20 years. Decommoditizing, I believe, it's a culture. It's very difficult in the region here. That's number one, but I wish it could happen. And second is the consolidation. I believe we have discussed this last time. I have said and still believe that consolidation won't happen from within. consolidation should come from a strategic partner who should come and who should be interested in the region to come and invest. We've seen Prysmian that they were aggressive with Oman, and they took the majority. They're trying to be present, but unfortunately, that's because they had a small minority, and then they expanded to a majority so that they can have a leading role. We've seen also Nexans in Qatar. However, in Saudi Arabia, we see it's not there yet, and I believe the probability of as time passed, probability of happening consolidations decreased. By the way. In 2015, we should have, if it should happen, if it will happen, we should have seen this in 2015. Many international players were interested in the regional market. However, the devil is in the details. There is valuation, there is money, there is an investment, there is an owner who already have money in his pocket. I can keep my line and then keep it shiny, clean it, and then wait until the economy comes up again. I will not sell it at a low price. I believe it is a bit difficult. However, I believe there's one good idea that we cable manufacturers think of instead of on consolidation, which is specialization. Nowadays, you see everybody is running after everything. Okay? It should not be the case. We are putting up a strategy that we don't want to be in everything. I am not interested to be in all the product ranges, no. Why don't company X specialize in product A, company Y specialize in product B, company Z specialize in product C, and then by itself, this will improve the business or the market by itself. Now you see, company A can do, or company X can do A, B, C, D, E, F, up to the end. Okay, you come one shop stop. Come on, what is this? I'm a grocery or what? This is exactly commodity. This is exactly the case. And honestly, we are trying to get away from this, and by searching between markets, innovation, products development. And we don't know what we'll reach, but hopefully the economy, at the end, without demand, innovation without demand is honestly a piece of paper in your desk.
I mean, regarding specialization, this is a strategy that our company had until about 3 years ago. And we basically grew through the niches in the market, replacing imports in the Iranian market. What end result was that these 100 local players looked at us, oh, they're making good money. And they started investing. Copying and investing. So we've actually decided to enter I would say the construction cable market to deny the competition as these safe houses. And don't allow them any breathing room so they can invest in new equipment and hit us where it hurts.
Right. So it's a very tough competitive environment you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you look in Iran, that's something that you can correct me if I'm wrong. The total demand is 100,000 tons, right?
Copper tons probably about the same in aluminum.
100,000 tons per year. And you have 200 cable factories. You can just imagine maybe like one company is produced maybe 100 tons. Yeah. However, its price can affect a company that's producing 10,000 tons.
That, and also they probably, even some of these small companies through underselling probably make more money than we do.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This happens in Egypt. I had this very similar. However, Egypt has also done some reforms in the utility itself in terms of quality, and then you stop seeing a lot of these small companies that are really affecting because in terms of quality, I believe they're not the same as yours. Am I right?
No, they're not. But I mean, again, in the market, we're sort of the consumer sensitive about the cable they're buying. I mean, again, in the construction sector, you see this strange situation, which to me doesn't make sense, where a consumer cares more about the brand of toilet installed in their apartment than the quality of the electrical systems. But then again, as I said, it's something they don't see. It's not tangible. But perhaps what Intel did with their Intel Inside campaign could be applied to this sector. I do see an opportunity actually there, because in Iran, I've got numbers from the fire department, and in Tehran, 70% of the fires are due to cable. So, and I think fear is a great selling point. It's one of the strongest marketing tools you can have. So I think we might be utilizing that.
Yeah, I mean, if the cable's that bad.
Yeah. I mean, the US are going to Home Depot, everything's all rated up by the cheapest. And the Indian market with this mess, I see an opportunity actually.
Right, okay, so there is no really minimum. There's some really poor quality cable.
We have compulsory national standards, but they're poorly enforced and the fines are negligible. There's no criminal ramifications if you sell substandard products. They stop you with a couple $100. If they catch you, you get a couple $100 fine. I mean, it's not a, you know, so.
Perhaps one comment on consolidation as not being originally from the region, but and I tend to agree with what you said, Mohamed, that I mean, looking from a Westerner point of view to the market, consolidation should have happened 2 years ago. And if it has not happened, I mean, what would make it happen now? If you have been able, I mean, if all the companies have been able to withstand these difficult times, what would make them change their mind now? I mean, hoping for the projects to restart. So I would say theoretically, consolidation makes a lot of sense in this region. The market is very, very fragmented. But I don't know what would be a new trigger, triggering factor that has not happened over the last years.
When some of the Saudi companies were getting rid of 2/3 of their workforce, they were unable to rehire them. But in some other markets, you would lose those good people. You wouldn't want to lose or be able to do that in your company. So that's the thing that's quite striking. Looking at some of the Saudi companies, that they've been able to almost rehire some of those people.
Yeah. Honestly, add to it also, nowadays, the geopolitical situation is not that much lucrative. And for an FDI, and normally there is a saying that the capitalist is always a little bit coward when he's investing. And when you want to really attract him and to change his mindset, there should be something really encouraging, lucrative for him so that he comes and invests in that country. Nowadays, I believe the region, I'm not talking about the UAE, but I'm talking about mainly in Saudi Arabia. UAE is lucrative, I believe. However, the pricing is very low. That's because Saudi factories are inside in UAE nowadays. And once this goes back home to sell and to do business in the home country, it may change. However, today, I don't believe there is anything that will make any foreign investor to come from outside, a strategic partner, let's say, call it this way, to come and do business in today. Okay, it needs some time until the war in Yemen finish, whatever happening in Syria also close. The vision of Saudi, the 2030 vision, also becomes clearer. The Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman puts up at least the first stage of his development. We have seen there is a lot of restructuring that's taking place. Now we're seeing cinemas. Now we're seeing also a new Disneyland concept in Riyadh. But these are future things that will come. Once these come, also culture starts to become a little bit different than what is happening, what is today. And once real investment takes place, once this Tabuk project, NEOM, comes also into action more, then you see that maybe then it will become a little bit more attractive for strategic investors to come and to invest in Saudi Arabia.
Mohammed, I wanted to say similar, beginning, but with a twist to it. I mean, I was thinking that if I'm an investor and I'm sitting in the room and hearing us talking from the beginning, will I put money in a new cable factory? I mean, that's the question that I would have asked.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, yes, I mean, the idea, and we talked about specialization and all, but the idea is, I mean, there are changes that are taking place also. There is new technology that's coming up. There is, I think the question is about sustainability. I mean, there are new technology that's coming up. There's solar technology, there is different types of technology, distributed networking. But it can take a different form. So, I mean, it can be seen differently as well. Not only as, it depends on just the political scene.
And I guess in a way that the snapshot from leadership is right now the market's quite tough, which is kind of, I guess, what we're reflecting that tough environment right now. in our kind of discussions, but and any other kind of more optimistic thoughts on?
Yeah, there is. They have to move your machines away from Saudi Arabia and put them in another country.
I think no. I mean, I
Honestly, yes,
agree.
this is optimistic. Why
I'm really
you don't
optimistic
look at
about
it this way?
solar power. So I mean, the solar investment in the region. That's going to be a big demand driver, and they're probably more quality sensitive than a lot of other customers. And automotive, and especially with the new standards. I mean, you're looking at the increased automation in the cars, which means that an electrical failure no longer is a case of your headlights not working. It's a matter of life or death. So automotive standards will move closer and closer to aerospace standards.
Yeah, we've got a leading Arab producer, Coffee Caps, kind of in that space.
Hmm.
A very strong position. Okay, well, thank you very much for the great contribution. I've enjoyed it. So again, please thank the panelists for their contribution. And also thank you to those that have texted in as well. I've tried to ask a few questions, one or two less sensitive, which I'll maybe kind of chat to the panelists about capacity, etc. But again, thank you very much. And we've now actually, I guess, we have our lunch break now. Thank you very much, and we should see you back here at